back. And now we're going to talk about, is this all Barack Obama's fault? I am joined once again by the LSE's Fawaz Gerges in Berlin. Here in New York are Bret Stephens, the Pulitzer Prize-winning foreign affairs columnist for the Wall Street Journal, and Peter Beinart, a CNN political commentator and a columnist for Haaretz. Thanks all. So is there something, Bret, here that ties these two things that are happening simultaneously, Iraq and Israel-Gaza, together, in your view, in terms of how the Obama administration is handling things?
Look, when Obama became president, he very clearly told Americans he wanted to pivot away from the Middle East. There was a view that the Middle East was a place where nothing good could happen with American interests. And the less we intervened, the less we were involved, generally speaking, the better. We're now seeing something of the consequences of that worldview playing out.
Though it's true, nothing good is coming out of the Middle East.
Well, much worse things are coming out of the Middle East, and you see this in the plight of desperate people in northern Iraq facing a terrorist regime, a state now, really, in northern Iraq that is simultaneously threatening the Kurds, as you pointed out earlier in the segment, the very existence of the state of Iraq, Syria. ISIS is moving into Lebanon. And so the president has been playing this game in which he says, I want to be as little involved in this region and as reluctantly involved. And as a result, American policy has consistently been a matter of too little.
But then with Israel, you feel like he pushed Bibi Netanyahu too much, I assume.
Well, yes, it is true that he was. I think that Kerry made a grave mistake by insisting on putting Israel-Palestine, the peace process, at the center of the beginning of his concerns as Secretary of State. But his biggest mistake, really, quite frankly, with in the case of Israel, is not remembering Machiavelli's old dictum, which is you need to be seen in political affairs as a true friend and a thorough foe. The way the Obama administration has been playing this war has been to act as a kind of soccer referee, handing out yellow cards to Israelis for this strike or to Gazans to the other strike. The administration had to realize clearly early on that Israel is its friend, Egypt is its friend, Saudi Arabia is its friend, and to pursue or to back their interests as clearly as possible against a terrorist entity trying to start another Middle East war.
Peter, how do you grade Obama on all this?
I think actually on Iraq, there are some significant problems. And I agree with part of what Bret has said, believe it or not. I think that the Obama administration wanted to allow Maliki to be in power and didn't want to hear about Iraq. And as a result, Maliki was becoming more and more sectarian. People were telling the Obama administration he's alienating the Sunnis, and that's going to make it easy for another jihadist threat to emerge. Now, it's not clear how much leverage we have over Maliki, because after all, Maliki wanted us to go. It's not like he wanted us to go so he could be more sectarian. Still, I think it's striking that the Obama administration never even spoke out about his growing sectarianism. So on that front, yes, I think there's some criticism. On Israel, Obama, look, let's be honest, Obama threw in the towel on Israel as early as 2010 because he has never wanted the domestic political consequences of a struggle with an Israeli prime minister who is basically hostile to a two-state solution. That's the bottom line.
You point out that in the course of this conflict, Bibi Netanyahu has said something very significant, which suggests that he really does not contemplate a two-state solution.
3 weeks ago, Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will require permanent or at least indefinite military control of the West Bank. That means there will be no independent Palestinian state. In fact, that's consistent with what we know about what he said in the private negotiations under Kerry. This may be the most significant outcome of this war, because if you have no conceivable path towards a two-state solution, you have no political strategy against Hamas. You have destroyed politically Mahmoud Abbas and any other Palestinians who offer an alternative path.
Look, first of all, just earlier in this show, we were praising the Kurds for the restraint they've shown in developing the institutions of statehood without actually pressing the statehood button. And the Kurds actually would be an excellent model for the way the Palestinian political culture should have developed. Remember, in 2009, just when he returned to the office as Prime Minister, Bibi gave a speech at a right-of-center Bar-Ilan University, known as a right-of-center university, saying we need to accept the fact that there should be a two-state solution. This was a radical step for a Likudnik like Bibi to take. But look, reality changes. Facts on the ground have changed in a very significant way, and it's impossible for the Prime Minister of the Israeli state not to take that into account. When Israel was shut off from international air travel because a rocket managed to go from Gaza to close to the only international airport in Israel. Bibi had to take that into account. What's at issue here is Palestinian political culture, and if Hamas is allowed to survive in Gaza, if it's seen as coming out with some kind of victory, the ultimate cause of a Palestinian state, a decent state that can live at peace with itself and its neighbors, is going to be set back.
All right, I got to go. Fawaz, what would destroy Hamas in your view? You've studied the Palestinians for decades.
Farid, the alternative to Hamas is the Islamic State, which we have been talking about just a few minutes ago. In fact, and I'm going to say something very shocking to your guests, Hamas has come much further than the right in Israel in terms of its acceptance of a two-state solution. Of course, it has been demonized in the United States, and of course, it's not my cup of tea. I would like the Palestinians a more progressive political movement. But the reality is Hamas is the other side of the coin, of the right in Israel itself. But let me just say a few words about American foreign policy and Israel and Palestine. If the establishment, Farid, of a Palestinian state serves American national security interests, as the foreign policy and security establishment says so, then Barack Obama must act more boldly and take political risks and not allow the tail to wag the dog as Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing. Benjamin Netanyahu has been creating facts on the ground. He has been playing for time. He never believes in a two-state solution, a state, Palestinian state, viable, independent Palestinian state. And the reality is Barack Obama has proven to be a politician who accepts basically the dysfunctional American political system when it comes to Israel and Palestine.
Very quickly, gentlemen, 15 seconds each. Will the situation in Gaza result in the destruction of Hamas as a political entity?
If Hamas chooses a war of attrition, ultimately it will. Hamas has been massively weakened by the war. Its military resources aren't infinite, and the political patience of Palestinians, I suspect, isn't infinite either.
No, Hamas is not going away, unfortunately. The question is, can you politically weaken Hamas by showing Palestinians that nonviolence and mutual recognition get somewhere? When you further and further subsidize Israeli settlement growth to destroy a Palestinian prime minister who has accepted Israel, then you strengthen Hamas.
Gentlemen, I have to let you go. Fascinating conversation.